actually do we have quorum?
Yep.
We're good? Okay. Thank you. Bring the meeting to order. Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, meeting 149. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, main estimates 2019 to 2020. Vote 1 under the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying. Vote 1 under the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. Vote 1 under the Office of the Senate Ethics Officer, and votes 1, 5, 10, and 15 under the offices of the Information and Privacy Commissioners of Canada, referred to the committee on Thursday, April 11th, 2019. And today we have with us from the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada, Carolyn Maynard, Information Commissioner of Canada, France Labine, Deputy Commissioner, Corporate Services, Strategic Planning and Transformation Services. And last but not least, Leila Michaud, Deputy Commissioner, Investigations and Governance. And we'll start off with you, Commissioner, for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président et Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I am pleased to be here with you today once again. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, I'm joined by two of my deputy commissioners, France Labine and Leila Michaud.
Under my belt as the new Information Commissioner. And let me begin by saying that at this point in my mandate, I see a very positive signs of progress, but also some challenges that are laying ahead. I am very grateful for the $3 million in temporary funding announced for my office in Budget 2019, which was sought in order to allow me to maintain the momentum of my complaint inventory reduction strategy. I will be devoting this money to hiring new investigators, just as I did with the $2.9 million of temporary funding allocated in last year's budget. Il s'agit de la quatrième.
This is the fourth consecutive year that my office has requested and receives temporary funding. Let me underline that these requests for temporary funding were stopgap measures in anticipation of a more permanent solution. Improved funding is the key to enhancing the capacity of the OIC to resolve complaints. My team is making the best use of every dollar we receive. We are reviewing and improving the investigation process. We are innovating with technology to speed up tasks and processes. We are collaborating in every way possible with institutions and requesters with the single goal of completing investigations efficiently and effectively.
For themselves. The number, the quality, timeliness of completed investigations have dramatically improved. My team closed more than 2,600 complaints in 2018-19. This is 76% more than the previous year. It's a record for this organization. 2/3 of these investigations resulted in requesters receiving more information and a faster response from an institution. However, despite our best year ever, I see trouble in the horizon. I started the first year of my mandate with an inventory of approximately 3,500 files, and I received more than 25 new complaints in 2018-19. This large number of new files meant that despite my team's excellent performance, I was barely able to make a dent in my inventory. At this rate, it will take us decades to clear our backlog. Simply put, my allocated resources of $11.5 million in main estimates and 93 approved full-time equivalents are stretched extremely thin by the enormous caseload, which has increased by 25% in the last 6 years. Without the additional funding, I could have in the neighborhood of 5,800 old and new complaints in the book this year. De plus, les modifications qui sont proposées.
On top of this, the proposed amendments to the Access to Information Act, currently before Parliament, will have operation and therefore financial impacts on my office, potentially significant ones. At the time Bill C-58 was introduced, the then President of the Treasury Board stated that the government would also be increasing the Information Commissioner's resources by $5.1 million over the next 5 years and by $1.7 million on an ongoing basis.
$1.7 million will be very welcome should Bill C-58 be adopted. It will not be sufficient for my office to meet the requirements of the bill in its current form. Looking ahead, operating year by year with temporary funding is both inefficient and unsustainable. This is my number one concern. It does not allow me to plan for a medium or long term. Insufficient funding means that I am unable to maintain momentum in completing investigations and ensuring that Canadians' right of access to information is respected. I can assure you that I will continue to use my current resources to the greatest effect. I will also continue to take every step I can to find efficiencies in my operations. But frankly, there is only so much that reviewing processes and streamlining can achieve. This is why it is a priority for me this year to secure adequate permanent resources that will account for all the work my office has to carry out under the Act. Avec plus de ressources permanentes,
With more ongoing resources, I could increase the size of my investigation team permanently to not only complete more investigations each year, but also get moving on new ones more quickly. In addition, the PROS funding would also be required to allow me to operationalize the amendments to the Act and to ensure a smoother transition as possible. These are the results I would like to achieve for Canadians. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I would be pleased to take your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll start off with the first 7-minute round to Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Thanks very much. It is incredible in some ways that C-58 is still not law, but you probably feel that more than we do. I guess I just want to get a picture of the number that you would be looking at on an ongoing basis to fulfill the needs of your office. What is that magic number?
magic number to respond, well, we have 3,500 old complaints right now in the backlog and in the inventory.
Let's just bracket that for the time being and say on an ongoing basis, how much does your office need annually to function with the current requests?
Right now, with the $3 million extra that we have, we are floating just equally with what we're coming in and what we're finishing. So I'm receiving about 2,500 complaints a year, and this year we closed 2,600. So 100 cases closed.
And that's with the 11.5 from the main
Plus
with
3
the
million.
top up of 3. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're looking at 14.5 million to
Just
to get by with the, and you said it was 25% increase over 6 years. Has that stabilized, or it's like a
It keeps
continued
going up.
trajectory?
Yeah, it keeps going up. From 2014 to today, we started with 1,700 complaints a year, and now we're about at 2,500 a year.
And then so if there was a one-time injection of funds to say, let's clear out that backlog, 3,400 would be left, I guess, after this year. How much money is required to clear out that backlog?
It's very difficult to know. I suspect we were told at my office calculated that we would need approximately $9 million in 1 year to hire all the investigators necessary to get rid of the backlog. But even if we were to do that, the institutions would not be able to absorb the extra workload. So we need a continuous amount of money coming in, at least for 5 years, so that we can work on our backlog, work on new files. But we also need more resources for the institutions to be able to respond to us, because we can't do these investigations by ourselves. We need the institutions to be able to respond to both new requests and complaints.
And so at what point does a file enter into the backlog, as it were? It's after 1 year, after...
Oh, it's just at the end of the year, the inventory of when we start the year. So
But that's what I mean. So when we talk about 3,500 that are in the backlog, and you've cleared out 2,600, so I commence a file today, and it's a year from today that you would consider, if it's not closed within that year, it sort of enters into the backlog.
It's in my inventory when I
So there
start
are
the year.
3,500 files that are over a year old. What's the oldest file? How many years old would the oldest file be?
2007.
2007.
My daughter's.
Wow. And is that because it's just a very complex file?
Very complex file.
And
Yeah.
so is there a sense of, when you look at the 3,400 that remain, is there a sense of there are very complex ones like the one that
We
would
have
take up
about
the bulk of
500
time?
cases. Well, we were less than now, because I think we reduced it to 300, less than 2015.
Yes.
Because that was my priority this year. I wanted to get rid of all the old files previous to 2015. The problem with those cases, most of them are special delegation, national security cases, consultations with other countries, provinces. Like there's a lot of complexity to these files, or they're humongous. Sometimes we have to talk to different institutions, third parties, information. So they're not those type, the quick and easy are done within the year. It's the backlog gets bigger and larger with older.
Is there no way to triage to say, there are really complex ones that are going to take a really large amount of time, but with an additional set of resources, we can really tackle?
That's what the plan is. We're going to
see,
be attacking the backlog with a special team starting this year. And we also have an early intervention team that we just put in place last year, and they're doing the new case as they come in. So hopefully, the backlog will reduce to the middle.
Now, in terms of going forward, it seems to me not only would more resources for your office make things go more smoothly and resolve a lot of files, but addressing the culture of delay that this committee learned a lot about in the course of our first study would go a long way as well. You've been on the job for 15 months. Your predecessor spoke a lot about the culture of delay. Have you experienced this culture as well?
What we experience is by eliminating the fees, the requesters often will ask larger amount of volume of documents. The institutions have not responded to those volumes as well as we were anticipating. And the problem, interestingly, the number of cases that we have on delays and time limits are about 1,300 a year. And what we're doing is we're negotiating with the institutions a date where the person will get their file. But we don't get that many complaints about time limits, not as much as I thought we would get, versus the amount of the numbers that we see in the stats from Treasury Board. We realize that about 62% of the cases are done within 60 days of the request being received. And that means there's about 27,000 to 30,000 cases that are over the 60 days. What we see in my office is usually past 120. People, I think, are pretty reasonable, and when they can negotiate or timelines that is reasonable for them because of the volume of their request, we don't see that many under 120 days, but over 120 days, usually that's when the requesters come to my office to make sure that it's
I seem to recall, I had put forward amendments for C-58, as had a number of my colleagues, and there was that one provision that the government actually was sort of taking a step backwards from my understanding. This was a while ago now. But the Senate fixed that, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so the Senate was able to do something that this House committee was unable to do, unfortunately.
What do you mean, the Section 6?
Section 6,
yes.
But it was identical to what this House committee was asking for. That's right. I'm not making that up. That is right.
Section 6, which was asking for the subject matter, the timelines. Yes, this position has been removed.
Yeah. So we had put something forward, and then the Senate had put something forward, and they were able to get it through. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for visiting us again. When Bill C-58 was originally tabled, your predecessor said it failed to deliver on the government's promise of openness and accessibility, and said, in fact, it was a regression of existing rates. We know that it's in the Senate. There have been many amendments. How would you characterize the bill as it sits in the Senate today with those amendments?
Actually, there's been about 30 amendments made to the, and I would say 3/4 of those amendments were requested by my office or from my predecessor. So what I would say is that the current version of the Act is definitely a better bill than the stretch that what we have currently. The Act right now is 35 years old, and what is being proposed in the amendments have made it better.
So would that mean that your predecessor's characterization of C-58 as regressive has been eliminated or has been transformed by these amendments? Or is it still?
I think her call for changes has been responded to.
It has been met.
Yeah.
You are satisfied with C-58 as?
Oh, the Act still needs to be reviewed, and I'm really happy that one of the amendments is that there's going to be a mandatory review in a year, and after that every 5 years, because we, and as everybody knows, we haven't been consulted for Bill C-58. So that's one of the issues, that a lot of those amendments came after the fact. I'm really hoping that in the next year we will have those consultations that were necessary, and that the examples that we have through our investigations will be used to better the Act, especially some of the exemptions and the exclusions that have not been touched by Bill C-58, I think needs to be looked at with our new, digital world and what the Canadians are requesting. So I'm really looking forward to that process coming up.
So
If
do I
it's
take
passed.
from that you would urge the senators to get that legislation back to the House as soon as possible and that the House accept it in its full amended form?
I'm really hoping that Bill C-58 will be passed, before.
Coming now to the better delivery of services across departments and agencies, could you give us sort of your best performers in the 15 months since you took office, and the worst performers in terms of improvements and responsiveness?
Well,
There must be a worst performer. I suspect we know who it is.
The problem
or
is,
which it is.
I think it's difficult to talk about this because I can only report on in my annual report. But in terms of numbers, we have some issues with some institutions that have been every year. The RCMP is having a really hard problem getting resources. We have the IRCC that is doing very well there. They get 55,000 requests a year, but they're still, and they're pretty good actually responding to those requests. We had really good collaboration this year with Canada Post. We had old files with them, and we were able to find strategies to close them and to get the information to the requesters.
A large part of the RCMP's backlog was that many of the requests were actually by force members trying to get their own personal data. Has that contradiction of...
I'm told that that's one of the issues, is that they were asking their own members to go through the access request to obtain their personal information, and that has been fixed.
That has been fixed. Now, I'm sure that you're aware of the Global Television access to information request to the RCMP regarding the Prime Minister's illegal vacation and the RCMP response 2 years later. Is that a case that you would flag and investigate?
I can't comment on whether or not we have a complaint on this issue, but I can tell you that anything that we see in the news we follow, and if there's reason to start a systemic investigation, we think about it.
Is it fair to say that privacy is often across departments, across agencies, privacy is often an excuse offered to justify delays where there may be sensitivities or reasons to not respond promptly?
Privacy, you mean Section 19, the personal information?
Yes.
This is the most used exemptions in all requests that we ever see. Yeah, 40% of our requests or complaints deals with Section 19.
And do you
personal
think
information.
that the staff at these departments and agencies need to be better informed as to what the limits of using that exemption
Well,
might
that's
be?
one of my priority this year, is to issue more guidance, and in positions when we find examples where the section has not been used appropriately, we are going to start publishing more of those decisions, hopefully with Bill C-58, which will allow me to publish decisions as they are decided instead of waiting for special report or annual report. That's going to be a big plus. But we definitely see some cases where we can help institutions better understand their obligations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Next up for 7 minutes, Ms. Hardcastle. Welcome.
Thank
7
you.
minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. I guess just picking up from where my colleague, Mr. Kent, left off, and you're doing some, you're focusing in and doing some coaching, I guess, and some, what about the solicitor-client privilege issue with the Department of Justice, like this Section 13? Is that an area that you're looking at trying to review or reinforce, or repair. Is that an area that you see that needs attention, or is that just,
Section 23 is the solicitor-client privilege. It's a discretionary exemption, so I think the biggest work we have to do right now is work on what are the factors to be considered when we use discretion and how we review those cases. Often the discretion is well applied, but we have factors that are encouraging access versus other institutions who will prefer more privacy or secrecy. And solicitor-client privilege is, I can tell you, the case law is not helping us in giving access. Like the case that deals with Section 23 are very anonymous. Like it's a privilege and it has to be protected. So what we're trying to do is finding lines with the current minister and his staff of what they consider really like pure solicitor-client privilege versus training manual versus policies. Sometimes we have legal counsels involved in policy drafting, but it's not legal opinions. So we have a lot of examples, and definitely those type of examples are the cases that I want to use in the future to provide guidance and examples of where my office is positioning themselves with respect to those sections.
okay. And thank you very much for that. And one other thing, just going back to some of the issue of the backlog and needing, stable, predictable funding to be able to get a game plan forward. I see there was some initiative that was taken with the online pilot project. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities there or what you learned from it, and the financial impact that has on your resources too.
Yeah, in December 2018, the online complaint form was launched, and the problem with the complaint, it's being used. It's a good tool, and 85% of our complaints are now being done electronically, which is really helping us do our work. The one issue with it is it's a protected A system, so complainants are enabled to upload documents that would be protected B or with personal information. So what we're working on right now is enhancing that system so that we wouldn't have to wait for the mail that accompanies the complaint form, because now it's like what we gain, we're losing in waiting for the information to come by the mail or through emails, protected emails. So we're working on the system. We've done we took other steps also to improve our system, and that's why I think we did so well this year by closing 2,600 cases. Is we reduce our size of our teams. We involve legal counsels right away in files. We are collaborating with institutions, and I know when I say that, people are cringing because I'm investigating them, but we are meeting with the DMs and ADMs and the leadership of every institutions to show them what they are protecting, and when they see it, it's very impressing to see the reaction of institutions when they actually are notified about what they're trying to protect or the redaction. And sometimes I see that the communication between the ATIP office and the OPIs and the leaders is not the same. Like we have great collaboration at the top, great collaboration at the office, and sometimes it's the middle management that is afraid of letting go information. So what we're trying to do is get them to talk to each other and having the team, the leader to really explain their vision about access and the open and transparency of their institutions. So we're getting a lot of progress in that way, in meeting those institutions personally, and even the executive committees. Like I've been to many committees, but it's working. Yeah.
Oh, 2 minutes.
Okay, and so with that then, are there recommendations, or how are you envisioning that the financial impact, or should new dollars be invested in that area? I know another area would be the security aspect and the technical security with the online, but So
We need
what are you doing moving forward
We
then?
need to invest in training. We need to invest in staffing. We need to invest in resources. Not only like some of the institutions I'm talking to, they have the financial resources. They can't find anybody. Consultants are very expensive, and for me, that's one of the reasons I want permanent funding. Is I'm hiring consultants on a year by year basis. But after 31st of March, I have to let them go. Their files are not finished. I have to reassign them to new people. I have to start a new contract process and then find new consultant. All the institutions are stealing from each other, staff that are trained. We really need to invest in that area, not just money-wise, but resource-wise.
Thank you. Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Picard.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Hi, everyone. Let's see how we can optimize the work that you do. How can we improve the situation? First of all, you spoke about more permanent measures that would better suit your needs. What type of permanent measures, and how can we envisage permanent measures given that you notice every year there's an increase in the number of complaints? Answer. Ideally, like any institution, I have to submit a request to the Treasury Board. Ideally, I would be able to come before the committee and, depending on the needs, request additional funds. As the Chief Electoral Office or the Ethics Commissioner. Personally, I think it would be the most suitable process for a parliamentary officer. And in this way, we could make the request as a function of the actual demand. The funds requested would be in keeping with the year we're experiencing. Question. Are you talking mainly about funding for human resources? Answer. Currently, all I need are a few more bodies. Question. How can we have additional resources, find additional resources when the institutions that work with you can't find resources either? So it's not simply a matter of permanent funding. All the departments need the teams that would enable them to respond to demand. With regard to delays, given the type of investigation that you carry out, is there no type of Jordan decision ruling that could apply to you as well with a 5-year time delay? Answer. Currently, we are not allowed to wrap up a request or stop a request for every single request made, and that is every single complaint. We have to go right through the entire process until we've responded to every single point in the complaint. Bill C-58, however, if adopted, would allow me to stop investigations when it's a question of bad faith or when the complaint is frivolous, in the same way as other institutions are allowed to stop answering certain requests. These criteria are established based on what the law says, or there would be additional criteria? But answer, what is outlined in the law, but only for new requests. So what I have in my backlog, in my inventory, would be subject to the current law, but all new requests could be resolved with these new measures.
No, okay.
I don't see them continuing, so it
Okay,
must just be
okay. Must be,
we'll let you know.
Must be yesterday night. Revenez sur votre réponse tout à l'heure.
Let me go back to your answer from just now with regard to the electronic nature of your work? Is it the requests that are electronic or your answers? Answer. When a complaint is made, it can now be made electronically, online. The complaint form is online on our website. Question. That means people can make more and more complaints because it's easier. Answer. Yes, the number of complaints has increased, but not since we've had this online form. The number of complaints has increased since people have begun to ask for more information. It's gone up by more than 200% in the last 6 years. I receive 2,500 requests or complaints rather per year. The more complaints I receive, the more Canadians understand their right to access to information. Canadians are curious, and with proactive disclosure, people want more. People want to receive the information that supports this proactive disclosure. Question. It's possible to use automatic systems, robots. Would this be possible or in your case? Answer. Currently, I'd say no. No, we couldn't consider using them. Currently, the largest problem that we have is information management. I'm talking about the government here. We're in a digital age. Government institutions make decisions by email, by a whole set of emails going back and forth, and that's what's slowing us down. When you have an access to information request and there are 500 emails, there may be 3 only that are relevant for this request. But the person writing the emails doesn't sort them doesn't properly manage this information, and we end up with digital files that are voluminous. Question. So someone who answers with 100 emails, if they were to filter these emails, would be answer. No, the law does not allow us to erase any information that's pertinent. But currently, nobody is sorting out their emails. Email shouldn't be made, rather, decisions shouldn't be made using email. There should be documents. The same way as there is for expenses, financial expenses. There should be a documented decision with a signature on it. That's easy to obtain. But when you're talking about internal directives or major discussions about an institution, you realize there's a lot of stuff that shouldn't even be there.
So that's why the bells had gone off just briefly. Looks like it's fine now. So next up for 5 minutes, Monsieur Gord.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. You talked about 100,000 complaints, 2,500 go to your office. So 2.5% of people are dissatisfied with the information that they receive after making a request. This shows to what extent, when you investigate a complaint, it takes a lot of time. Now, the people sending you these complaints, are they aware of the costs that are associated with these complaints? It's not $200 or $500. It might be several thousands of dollars to respond to their complaint. People don't necessarily think about the money that this will cost. It's a free service, isn't it? When you give them an answer, are they satisfied with the answer, generally speaking? Or do they say, no, I would have liked to find out more? Is it that only 25 to 35% are happy with your answers and the rest aren't? Answer. Most people with whom we work, whom we deal, are satisfied with our services. Of course, no one's happy with the time it takes to respond. Many complainants believe. You said that this service is available to make sure that the law is upheld. And often we can solve a complaint merely by explaining to them what we have in front of us. We see the files in front of us. When we receive a complaint, we request the file, and the files aren't redacted. So we can say exactly what has been disclosed to the person. And simply by saying to them, yes, the exemption was appropriate, the complainants are happy. They want to know that there's someone who is not within an institution who is able to tell them that everything was done properly. And we're able to settle a lot of complaints in this manner. But there are people who are less satisfied, who want more information. They think they should have access to everything. But currently, unfortunately for some, I need to uphold the law. If there are exemptions, as long as they're applied appropriately, then everything's fine. I'm fulfilling my mandate. Question: are there Canadians who use your answers to sue the government? Answer: I'm not aware of any cases like that. Of course, the documents that are disclosed may end up in court one day, but I don't think they decide to go to court based on my recommendations or conclusions. Question: when you receive complaints, does it go onto the pile, and when the moment comes, then you take it, or do you decide ahead of time? Do you triage them, so to speak? Answer: well, this is what we've done, actually. We have a team, a triage team, that was set up to look at the requests. We decide immediately if we can answer them right away. When an analyst has just wrapped up a file and the complainant knows exactly what he or she wants, it's easier. When you have a file that's been on the pile for 5 years, sometimes it's no longer relevant. The analyst in the institution is elsewhere, is no longer in their employ. The request may no longer be pertinent, so it's really better to respond as quickly as possible. But of course, we do have cases that will require a formal investigation that are very, very detailed. So we do that triage as soon as we get the request. Question: with regard to permanent employees versus consultants, what's the percentage? What's the proportion? Answer: currently, I have 5 external consultants out of 60 investigators. So there's 60 investigator positions, and the remainder of those people are they work for legal services, etc. Question: so you require some 25 new employees to take care of all those requests? Answer: that would be ideal. If all the provisions are adopted as they stand now, then we will require even more employees, because there will be changes proposed by the Senate. These changes would have a big impact on our resources. Thank you.
Next up, Madame Fortier, for 5 minutes.
Merci. Alors, bienvenue. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much and welcome. Thank you for your presentation. We can see that you've made efforts to get through all these cases. I'd like to understand the consequences. What happens if you can't continue because you don't have the money you require? What will happen apart from the lateness? Answer: I think it affects my office's credibility, but also the government's credibility. This is almost a constitutional right. It's a quasi-constitutional right, this right of access to information. We want Canadians to have the possibility to access information and to question decisions made by our organizations and departments, to be able to trust the government in its decision-making. Currently, if I can't answer the complaints and say immediately, yes, the institution did apply the provision properly and meet its obligations, or no, we think you require more information, If I can't do that, then the information is no longer relevant. The requesters need the information when they make the request, and the longer we wait, the less credible we are. Thank you very much. You mentioned training earlier, how important training is to be able to train people working in other departments. What do you mean exactly by training? Training different resources. Answer. This training project should be taken over by the government, I believe. It's not really part of my mandate, but there's definitely a need for training. A study was done by several institutional coordinators, ATIP coordinators, in collaboration with the Treasury Board. The study looked at the possibility of creating an agency that is to make access to information coordinators more professional. I don't know what's happened with that project. It would require funding, but that agency would provide training. It would create a pool of resources that could be lent to the various departments. The idea is to share the resources, this pool of resources. When there was the railway accident, Transport Canada received a lot of ATIP requests and was not able to respond. That pool of resources could be used to answer a sudden large number of requests. And I could help, of course, because we could publish guidelines. Everybody would be working according to the same standards. Based on your mandate. Yes, based on my mandate. I had another question. It was mentioned just now that if C-58 is adopted, if it is adopted, are there certain cases that you would be able to put an end to, that you would be able to wrap up? Or is it that you absolutely have to follow through with the examination, with the investigation? Is there some sort of grandfathered clause? Answer. The new law will only apply to new complaints. Question. So you must deal with this backload no matter what, even if C-58 is adopted. Those are all the questions I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I'll go to Mr. Erskine-Smith because you had one question, then we'll go to Charlie to finish. So.
Yeah, I'm going to pass my time over to Frank, but before I do, I just wanted to, while we're all here and without going in camera just yet, previously in December, we had a meeting where the lawyer for Ontario Proud had come before us, and we've obviously been caught up with holding Facebook and Google accountable and large social media platforms, and rightfully so, but I don't want to lose the thread entirely, and so I would ask that you follow up. There were certain undertakings that I believe Mr. O'Connor gave to this committee. I would ask that you as chair follow up in writing to ensure that Mr. O'Connor and Ontario Proud take our committee seriously and those requests seriously, and specifically whether or not an undertaking was made, I'd be interested in a request to understand the name of the undisclosed vendor. So that's my interest, and our.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, it's will of the committee to follow through with the request from Mr. Erskine-Smith? Yes.
Okay, and with that, Mr. Bayless.
Okay, go ahead, Frank. You have about a minute and a half left over from that time, so.
And counting.
That's what it was really. Yeah.
Okay. Is it still the case that the IRCC is representing more than half of your requests? So when I look at these 2,500 complaints, how many of them are...
Bayless? Sorry to interrupt you. We still have 15 minutes, so if you want to go and then we'll finish with Charlie, we still have time to do those two last questions, so go ahead. 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. I'll keep talking then. But I'll talk slower. No. Is IRCC still representing more than 50% of your requests?
It represents 50% of the request in terms of the request of access to information in government-wise.
Yeah.
But not 50% of my complaint, I don't believe.
But they're 50% of your requests.
Of the request of access to information.
Yeah, so are we taking any action to deal with that? Because it seems to me that this is a very weighting down your whole operations on people just wanting to know where their refugee claim or their immigration claim is. It seems to me not the right avenue to be using access to information to get that. Are you looking at changing that, adapting it?
I'm dealing with the complaints only, but the access requests are being governed by Treasury Board, and I understand that they are looking at tools to help IRCC respond to these requests through other mechanism than access requests.
Okay, so you're strictly the complaints.
I'm just doing the
But if we start off with, say, that 50, let's just simplify it, it's a little bit more than 50%. Let's say it's 50% of the requests are IRCC, which really shouldn't be, in my estimation, access to information. How much of the 25,000 complaints, are they 50% too? Like,
No, they're doing really well. RSCC is actually, because the requests, and as you mentioned, the requests are very simple, and they have a process in place that they're dealing with them. It's almost on an automatically basis. The only thing is it's a huge volume.
Yeah, I understand. So if I look, I've got the numbers here, I think till 216, 217, that's the last ones we had, and about 90,000 requests, and 48,000 were there. Where are these complaints coming from, the 2,500? Is there one or two bureau, is it spread across all other complaints, or is there one or two problematic areas that need to be addressed?
I believe their access requests are all dealt with one office here in Ottawa, and Leda was telling me that we got 500 complaints last year from the RCC. So they're dealing with about 55,000 requests a year, and I receive 500 complaints.
But out of the 2,500, already we can take off of 20%. 500 of the two. Is that what I understand?
500 of the 2,500 complaints last year.
So 20% of your complaints are just there. And so that answers that question. Now, you've got 2,000 left. Is there, and I'm looking at these requests come from across the board, I have the numbers, where are the problematic departments? Because it could be that we have one or two departments that are, where all these are washed up, because you've got 500 out of, say, 50,000. That makes about, what, 1% complaint rate. So we'll say that, and you're looking at dealing with that, and that would still take away 20% of your work, right? So that's really good. Where's the next biggest problem?
Based on the stats from last year, we received the most from the RCMP.
So the RCMP, is that the Canada Border Services? Or no, RCMP is the
RCMP.
third one. Yeah,
RCMP,
so hang on a second.
there were,
So you had how many came from them?
we received 370 cases from the RCMP.
370, and they had 3,800 requests the previous year, or whatever. So you got 10% of their actions are complained, compared to 1%. So RCMP is a big one, right? So 10% of your complaints are 10% of RCMP actions are then people complain against them.
Yeah.
And where's the next one?
The CRA is our next
CRA, okay, and how many complaints?
Canada Revenue Agency. We only received 183 from them.
So that's
last
about
year.
5% there. So,
But they receive a lot of requests too.
well, I have like 3,100 2 years ago, but it's a lot, but they're getting about 5% are
yeah.
complaining. Okay.
The next one would be Canada Border Service Agency.
Yeah.
156.
And they got 6,000, 7,000.
And then it goes down to the Privacy Council office.
Privacy Council office?
The Privy Council.
Privy
the
Council.
PCO, yeah.
And how many complaints do you have there?
82.
And they have 820, so there's 10%. So have you done the math to look at where you're problematic?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like, okay, so are you not telling me, or you don't want to give me the list? I didn't ask the question. Fair enough. Where are the problem departments? How many and who are the problem departments? And how many
Each department
do you have?
has its own. I couldn't tell you like RCMP is clearly is a resource issue. Like
The complaints are resource-based, that they don't have the resources to do that. And so what happens, they don't do it, and then people complain to you, and you say, give me more resources so I can handle their complaints. But
But they
is it
need
right
more
for us to be
resources
giving you the resources, or we just give it to the RCMP to tell you?
It's exactly what I was saying earlier. Even if you gave me more, if you give me $9 million tomorrow morning and I can hire 25 new investigators, I will not get the response that I need from the institution because they don't have the resources to respond to
So
us. too.
realistically, us pumping more money into your department is not actually the solution, because, so they can't answer someone else, that someone else comes and complains to you, and you go, okay, now you gotta talk to them and to me, but they still say, I still don't have anybody to answer the question.
Yeah, there's some institutions where we will need additional resources to me
Okay, so what-
and
So I
institutions.
understand. Would it be,
We're
last
already
question, last question,
past-
would it be possible, just last question, would it be possible for you to give us a list of who needs what? Instead of just saying what you need, to say, look, it would be better if RCMP got this much money and Canada Border Services got this much, specifically targeting these requests for information so that they don't come to you.
If you can answer that quickly, that'd be appreciated.
I will. I'm trying to do this through my investigations, is making recommendations to each of these institutions. They have to go get the money and the resources, and they are responsible to put their priorities in the ATIP access.
What they should be asking for?
I can do in my annual report and special reports. We do that. We try to do that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bayless. Next up, Mr. Angus to take us home. So go ahead, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm interested in following up on some of the questions that was raised by Mr. Bayless. My first question, though, is we have repeat offenders, n'est-ce pas? Like the same the same organizations year in, year out. RCMP, it seems I've always been on this beat. It's RCMP, CRA, Canada Border Services. So it's a question of that they don't have the funds, or they decide not to put the funds in because they have other priorities. I mean, if we have a quasi-constitutional right to access to information, and you find year in, year out that there's the same laggards, to me that's not a problem that they have a lack of funds. That's a corporate problem within their structure. So what tools do you have to make them comply?
So and you're right. And the one thing that we are trying to do more and more is systemic investigations and audits of places where we know there's an issue with either resources or training, and address those and make recommendations to the institutions to address those. And those, I'm trying to do more of those, and I do have the authority. The other thing is we have to remember is not because people are complaining about an agency that they're doing inappropriate or they're not applying the act properly. And that's something that I'm trying to do better in reporting in the next couple of years is some requesters expect more information and they will complain no matter what the response from the institution is. And you may end up with an institution who's doing really, really well, and we always find that they're applied they may have more complaints, but we ultimately make findings that the complaints were not well founded. I don't think my office has been doing really well at providing that information through our annual reports or special reports, and something we're going to be working on. I think we need to really go and examine what are the issues, what causes the delays, are the exemptions or exclusions properly applied or not. And the other thing, too, is the statistics that we have from Treasury Board just provide statistics on timelines, but it doesn't give you the full picture of how big the request was, how many pages have been, and what we were noticing right now is that some institutions are doing really well in the timelines, but we're getting a lot of complaints on the exclusion and exemptions side. So they're doing the request really quickly, but they will block everything. And then we have to investigate because we know that so somebody may look very good on the paper, and because they respond to a requester quickly, they may not be that good in terms of meeting their obligations.
Right. Well, when we ask requests, sometimes the department comes back and says, oh my God, there'll be so many thousands of pages. What about focusing it and limiting? Yeah. So maybe we're asking, instead of for a 3-year period or 2-year period, we're asking for a 2-week period where we know where we're looking. To me, that's reasonable, and that's a department that's trying within their means
To respond.
to respond. I guess my concern is that, you know, we've just had a situation with Facebook telling the regulator, well, thanks, but we're just going to carry on. You know, I dealt through your office with the Justice Department for 6 years to try and get the political decisions around the decision to target the St. Anne's residential school survivors. And we were given delay after delay after delay, a threat to go to court. And we ended up with 3,000 pages of blacked out emails. So that tells me that the Justice Department doesn't believe that they actually have to comply. And do you have the tools to make them comply? Because in a case to me that is so egregious, I'm sure out of 3,000 pages there had to be at least one email that wasn't solicitor-client privilege. But, you know, we hear this with SNC. We hear whenever there's a government scandal, they just throw solicitor-client privilege, and then they can black everything out. Yeah. So how do we actually hold the Justice Department of Canada? Do they have to respect the quasi-constitutional rights of citizens as well?
Well, we are, you're right in the sense that I'm limited right now under the Act to make recommendations to departments when I don't agree with them. But I haven't hesitate to go to court after if they haven't agreed with my recommendations. And the new Act will give me the authority to make the orders. At this point, the institution will have to go to court if they don't agree with the orders. So I think that will be very helpful, and that's something that we'll be using. The other thing that, like I said earlier, it's very not annoying, but it's really hard to issue recommendations on a daily basis or weekly basis, and we can't do anything about it or publicize any of it. And so the people are not aware of what we're doing because we have to wait until the annual report or a special report is issued. Under the new Bill C-58, I'm going to be able to publish those decisions, which I think the institutions are not going to like as much. Yeah. So I think that's another tool that will be used and or will be beneficial, I think. And hopefully, the more we publish, the more Canadians see what they're entitled to, and institutions are realizing what we're pushing for. We're going to have more consistency and a better response rate.
So the ability to make an independent report based on a case and the ability to issue order-making powers is fundamental for you to ensure the rights of citizens to get access to information. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks again to the Commissioner for coming today. It's been a while, and you're starting to settle into your job well, and we look forward to you coming back again soon. So we're just going to suspend temporarily. We're going to go into camera for committee business about 2 minutes.
Thank you.